Hello, surfers of the World Wide Web. Steve Persh here, Director of Developer Experience at Pantheon. Today on the stream, we'll be exploring the block ecosystem of WordPress, and particularly how the block ecosystem has come to the theming part of WordPress. And we'll be exploring it through one of my absolute favorite questions in web development. How does the starting point, and particularly the starting persona of your website, influence how the whole website is built? I think that's a question that's a good entry point to understanding the differences between WordPress and Drupal, and even variants within WordPress and Drupal. Who are we starting with? That's the question that I bring up when I get asked for my hot takes on WordPress versus Drupal. And I've gotten that question a bunch in the 8 years that I've worked at Pantheon, where we run both WordPress and Drupal, as well as the decade before when I was building in both of those systems. On a feature by feature checklist style comparison, WordPress and Drupal look pretty similar. They're LAMP stack CMSs. They have different types of content, roles and permissions, extensibility, themes. In so many ways, they're incredibly similar. One of the most important differences, though, is who they start with. Drupal is centered around the site builder, a person who has a bit of development skill, a bit of theming skill, content structuring, a jack of all trades. WordPress is centered around the content authors. WordPress mission is much sharper. Democratize publishing. That's what WordPress exists to do. Democratize publishing. And so a few years ago, as the big thinkers in WordPress were examining the long-term roadmap, the evolution of WordPress, they decided to rebuild a lot of how WordPress is constructed around this idea of blocks. And we'll be seeing blocks in just a few minutes. The place that work started, the person, the persona it started with is the content editor. Uh, in WordPress, in the block editor, a block can be as simple as a paragraph of text, a heading, an image. It can get more complex, a quote with attribution, a gallery of images, perhaps a listing of content, blocks inside of blocks. As it gets more complicated there, it starts to sound like the Drupal site builder version of the word blocks. Drupal core has had blocks for as long as I can remember. Drupal core blocks are that site builder perspective of the assembly of the whole site. A Drupal block is often more like that listing of content or the menu in the sidebar, list of related content. Right now, we're at a moment in time where these competing understandings of blocks, what they mean for a website system, they are crossing one another. Drupal's concept of blocks or block-like things are increasingly getting used as editorial content creation units. WordPress blocks, which were first made for content editing, that body field, are now expanding to the rest of the page. WordPress blocks are expanding to answer fully or partially the question of how do we theme a WordPress site? So same idea, same checklist of features, but they're starting in different places, starting for different people and moving in different directions. Joining the stream now to bring their thoughts and much more expert perspectives, bringing in the folks from Calamuna here. We've got Jeff Herbert, Senior WordPress Developer, Christina Ung, WordPress Frontend Developer, and Ali Nadimi, Full Stack Web Developers. Welcome, Calamuna folks. I'm so glad to have you on the stream here today.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate you having us.
Thank you.
Thanks, glad to be here.
Yeah, Jeff, I'm wondering if you could give a brief introduction to yourself and Calamuna as a whole.
Sure. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I'm a senior WordPress developer at Calamuna. Calamuna is an agency that works primarily with mission-driven organizations and groups that are oriented towards making the world a better place in some way, something we're very proud of. We love our client list and our clients, and we feel like we're contributing to a better world in the WordPress space. Calamuna does do both Drupal and WordPress. The team that you see here today is the working group that was tasked with sort of modernizing our WordPress approach, given the theme that we inherited, and super proud of the work that we all did. I come from, this is now my fourth agency, I think, and a lot more fulfilling job than the ones I've had before. There's something a lot working to feed the hungry kids and house the homeless than building a 4-star hotel and making that go. So I'm super happy to be here.
Yeah, that's absolutely something that struck me early in my web development work. I was surprised by the difference that things like, does the website just look good? That had a huge influence on whether or not I was enjoying myself in any moment of work, working on a good-looking website or a website that just looked unprofessional. And then also, yeah, is this organization that I'm building the website for, like, are they something I'm excited about? Schools for kids, that's exciting. I won't name some of the other more boring businesses that I built websites for that just were not all that enjoyable. Christina, to bring you into the conversation as well, could you give some more background on yourself and your role in modernizing the approach to WordPress for Calamuna?
Sure. Yeah, I'm a front-end developer, and I have over 10 years of experience working at multiple agencies as well, and also as an in-house developer. I have a strong background in WordPress. It's the first CMS I've ever learned and have continued to use, so it's been really interesting seeing the progression of how much it's changed over all of these years. And yeah, I started out as a general developer, but my focus in the most recent years has primarily been front-end development, focusing on like things like modern CSS and JavaScript and React. So I'm really happy to be somewhere like Calamuna where I get to actually focus and specialize in one area of expertise. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah, it makes such a big difference to have a team where the roles fit together and complement one another. And Ali, to bring you into the conversation as well, what's your background and what roles are you playing in this modernization of Calamuna's approach to WordPress?
Thanks, Steve. I am a full stack web developer, and I have done mostly developments in WordPress, but for the past 5-6 years, I've also been developing in JavaScript realm with React and Redux and everything in between almost. So once the Gutenberg editor was introduced, and I saw that how powerful it is and how they're leveraging JavaScript, and that was beautiful moment for me. And I tried to like apply those expertise in my JavaScript that I had into the work, and it came out good. I liked it, and after that I have been working specifically in WordPress block editor, WordPress data package, and like WP API, depending on the client's needs. And my background also is like 90% specifically working in an agency environment. And like Jeff and Christina, Calamuna is kind of a place for us that we all come together in a mission-driven place. That's very important. You feel at home when you work at Calamuna because you know that you're making an impact.
Yeah, I really like that phrase of it all come together. I'm going to jump on that phrase and transition us here because we're going to be talking first about the theming part of WordPress, and on a metaphorical, maybe literal level, the theme is kind of where does it all come together? Where does the content entered by the content editors? Where does the functionality built by backend developers? Where does the styling and visual work done by designers and front-end developers, where does it all come together? You can, like, the theme is kind of where it all comes together. And Ali, could you give us this overview of different modes or different ways of thinking about, like, how does it all come together in the theme in WordPress?
Yes, I'd be glad to. Today our talks will be around block editor and the approach of hybrid themes, and how agencies can leverage all these, and where it all comes together to be able to create amazing experiences for our clients. We are gonna go over the classic themes then the block themes, and the combined approach of hybrid themes. And then I will introduce CalaPress and why we decided to take a hybrid approach and modernize our workflow. So what really are these terms like classic, block, hybrid, full site editing, and like everything in between that have been introduced into the WordPress community from 2015 onwards? And it was kind of revolutionized our approach and the community's approach to building websites in WordPress. So let's go over classic themes first. We all know them. There are good old classic themes like 2011, 2017, 2020. We all know them. They use PHP and HTML for their templating. They have widgets and they can be edited through customizers, some aspects of them. They have the appearance admin menu that you can edit your navigations. Then your theme setup is in PHP, where they add theme support, add or remove support of different aspects of the theme. Then the styling is in CSS, like any other application. And the content editing can be edited with TinyMC, which is the classic editor, or the block editor if it is enabled. There are very well-known examples like all the 20 families up until 2020, and then the underscores, which was the starter kit by Automattic, Understrap, which was the Bootstrap starter, and many others. There are also page builders. So page builders are also leveraging the classic themes, and they kind of hijacks everything from WordPress, and then they add their own styling and templating and other stuff onto it to create a theme. But they also fall into the category of the classic themes. So now, what are block themes? Nowadays, everyone talks about the blocks and block themes in a specific and full site editing. So what are those? Block themes are built to be fully compatible with the full site editing capabilities. Then later I will discuss the difference between full site editing and a block theme or block-based theme. So their templates are HTML files. So they were introduced first, and then we all thought, okay, so HTML? Okay. The first question came to my mind was, how do we edit them? What about the dynamic content? And it's questions like that. Then we finally realized that, oh, okay, it's not that bad. You can still use PHP there. And then customization, only through the site editor. Navigation, there's a block for that. Theme setup and config, interesting again. Theme JSON. Styling, theme JSON, and CSS variables that created through it. And the content editing is exclusively through the block editors. There are plenty of block themes available now. 2024 is also available, and WordPress 6.4, which released like a couple of days ago. Then what is the FSE, or full site editing, and block theme definitions? We are being asked these questions a lot from our customers, but I found a very nice explanation and clarification around that by Nick Diego in one of his tweets answering the other person's question. Was that full site editing can be known as a suite of features, whereas the block theme is a theme that's its templates and template parts are being exclusively and entirely in site editor, and they're blocks only. So they can be synonyms. A block theme for sure uses the full site editing features. And are those classic themes that bad? Our clients also ask that. Like, up until yesterday, you were telling me that this is good and this is good and this is good about the classic theme and WordPress approach, and now you're saying this is bad. No, we are not saying this is bad. We all know classic themes are good, but they are just not the WordPress approach and where the WordPress wants to go. So we can see all that from different comments that WordPress folks and also Matt Mullenweg, the co-founder, is making about classic themes and block themes. What is a hybrid theme? So hybrid theme is, in our idea, it has the best of both worlds. The templates can be PHP, can be HTML. Customization can be site editor or the customizer. Navigation, again, blocks or classic menus. Team setup and config. Add team support like the old days, and theme JSON. Styling, CSS variables, the style engine, and theme JSON. And content editing, again, you have option classic editor or block editor. 2021, Calapress, or literally any classic theme that you can add like blocks, block templates, and theme JSON to it can be considered a hybrid theme. There is a not so simple but looks simple recipe to convert a classic to a hybrid theme, and it is beautifully documented in fullsiteediting.com, and I've put the link and reference to that. At the end, why did we choose the hybrid approach to modernize Calapress? Well, Calapress functions as a hybrid theme, which takes in the classic approaches and full site editing goodies and combines them into a hybrid theme, and it creates awesomeness. So classic themes are tried and true. They have beautiful features that debugged and tried during the years. And full site editing teams are innovative and they are very user friendly. So we combine them together and create Calapress, which is awesome. And the advantages of a hybrid team that we discussed internally in our teams and then through many articles that we read and discussed in our discovery meetings and why to take this approach. The first one is gradual transition. So agencies often inherit websites and then they have to change the whole thing to a new approach, which mostly will be out of the scope and out of the budget of the clients. So by applying a hybrid team approach, you can leverage the innovation and, like I mentioned before, the tried and true approaches of before. Compatibility. There are many plugins still to this day that they are not compatible with full site editing features. So hybrid theme can compensate for that. You can use your good old loved plugins and then have the modern approach too. Hybrid themes, they are flexible. You have options like you want to go with this one with the block or a PHP template. You are fully free to choose. And the learning curve, so you have to train your developers internally. You can do it gradually again. The client requirements are also very important, and clients also need to learn and apply these editing features. The incremental innovation. So WordPress core team introduces all these new things to the community little by little. So it's not a good practice to always work on the bleeding edge. You have to be at least 1 or 2 versions behind and then see where that goes and then again adopt it. So a hybrid approach again helps with that. Here I've listed some very good references, and then that's all. Then I will later, Jeff and Christina will go in details on how we are actually doing the hybrid approach and how we build solutions for our clients.
Ali, thanks for that that overview. Now is the moment in the outline where I am supposed to go to the crayons and whatnot and talk about like the some of what you were getting into or hinting at about like the technical implementation here. But before I get to the Legos, just I want to comment on some of those benefits that you were highlighting in that last or second to last slide there, like the value of an incremental approach, the value of an approachable learning curve, like really can't be overstated. At Pantheon, one of our most resonant messages, and we try to bring this up as often as possible, is that web teams should escape the website relaunch mentality. Like one of the most dangerous things a web team can do is think we've got to wipe away everything and replace it with something totally new all at once. And that's an option that someone could undertake with a block theme and full site editing. So I have here, a high quality Photoshop comp. It's not a high quality Photoshop comp. It's a crayon drawing I did in about 90 seconds right before we started. But if we were to imagine this for a high quality Photoshop comp, in our pre-meeting, Calamuna folks, we were talking about that phase in the project where you do get the high quality Photoshop comp or Figma or whatever you're starting with, and then the team has to go through that exercise of splitting up, like, okay, which thing is a menu, what's the main content, what might be a block, and if you're building in a purely classic theme, you might have to talk about a lot of WordPress implementation details at a moment that might feel too early. When you're looking at that comp, when you're starting to divide up how the page is going to get structured in WordPress, when you're building on a classic theme and you have like 15 plus years worth of WordPress constructs to choose from, like which thing is a widget? What plugin is it coming from? Like all of these questions could appropriately come into the conversation. And that might be too much to discuss when you're first just trying to talk about, like, okay, how are we slicing and dicing this design? An advantage I see in that block, the all block approach, is like everything's a block. We slice it up however we want, and we know it's going to end up as a block. But Ali, I think part of what I was hearing you get at is like, okay, yeah, it might be simpler in some ways to think everything is a block, but we might be losing some valuable things if we simplify down that much. Does that match with the way you're thinking of it?
Absolutely, that's correct, Steve. Because, like you said, 15 years of tried and true approaches, right? And then you cannot just wipe it off all of a sudden and rebuild everything from scratch, and then start another 15 years experiencing that, and then again, but when it all comes together in a way that you can leverage both, then you'll realize, oh, okay, so I can keep my clients happy, I can train my developers, and I also can leverage from innovation. So why not? Is it easy? Yes, just with a couple of hours of study and trying to realize how is really possible. Yes, it is easy. It's just a matter of trying to look at it from other perspective, from the third eye, and see, oh, okay, so we can combine here. And that creativity and that point of view helps you to leverage best of both worlds and see that there are solutions in between. Let's not just think in black and white.
Yeah. So to that framing that I started with, where like the Drupal community thinks of blocks as like primarily the things around the content, and is now pushing the block concept like from here into here, and the WordPress community is going the other direction of like figuring out a block editor for the content and then pushing it out this way. And I think what I'm hearing you say is like, okay, yeah, just because we can push the block concept from the content area where it's pretty solid now in WordPress to every other corner of the page, doesn't mean for every single project we should do that 100% right away. Jeff and Christina, I'm curious if you have thoughts on like what are some of the factors that influence your decision for any given element on the page, how it gets implemented inside of WordPress?
Yeah, it's a great question, Steve. Like the first thing that I have to take into account when I'm architecting a site and making those kinds of decisions at a very high level, you've got drawn in your diagram there, the header and footer. Like if you're committed to a full site editing block editor experience, well, that's going to be visible to the client, and they may not want that. We talked to someone at WP Campus who had 900 users on a given site. Do you want user 712 to go in and change the header because they can access? Well, like no. So you either have to safeguard that, or you make the decision at a more fundamental level That part we're going to pull out and do old school, classic way, even though everything else is going to remain a block. And then as you get into the content, Christina can talk a little bit more about that. But yeah, you go literally design element by design element and to make a decision. How are we going to make this thing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also find that like the navigation across different sites is always so different and it requires a lot of customization. So us doing this the classic way provides us more flexibility. And also at Calmuna, we're huge about accessibility. So we have our own custom navigation that we've built out of like details elements that works without JavaScript. So we really want to like add features like that within our themes.
I may have to check that out for reasons beyond the scope of this stream. Because I'm right now I am interested in menu implementation details. Jeff, let's bring in your screen share here and get into some block WordPress block details.
Yeah, so just to kind of set the stage a little bit, what you're going to see here is a proof of concept site that we built for Fast Track, which is a organization in California that handles Bay Area toll bridges and toll tags on your car, motorcycle, whatever. They wanted to see, after seeing a demo of Gutenberg that we did for them, they were really excited about how easy block editing can be. And so they wanted to see, could they use that to build out the content CMS portions of their site, which is what we put together for them. So this was a real world implementation of CaliPress, which again is a hybrid theme. We did it for a variety of reasons, but the big thing was the ease of editing, so they can add and remove stuff much more quickly than they were able to do previously. And also that, they have a lot of these same kinds of concerns about what's available to an editor versus what's not. So the flexibility of a hybrid approach really helped. So I'm going to throw it over to Christina, and she's going to start us off talking a little bit about the guts of how we really did this.
Thanks, Jeff. One of the reasons why I absolutely love WordPress is because of the editorial experience it offers. There are so many customizations now available directly from the editor, like changing colors, fonts, and spacing. And while it's beneficial to have access to all of these options, it also increases the possibility of deviating from the site's original design, especially if you have like 900 users in your WordPress account. So at Calmuna, we provide a personalized editorial experience for our clients. We firmly believe in empowering our editors to confidently make changes on their site, but still respect those boundaries. We do a lot of this work through our theme.json file. That's where we have a lot of our style settings, custom CSS properties, and block editing settings. And for this demo in particular, I won't be diving into the theme.json file, but I'll show some of the benefits of it on the front end and in the editor. So for most of our sites, we typically build a style page like the one that's shown. This just contains blocks and patterns. It's a good way to have an overview of everything in one place. So I thought it would be the perfect thing to show for this call. In the right column, I've added all of our colors from our theme.json palette. And yes, if you actually click on that block, you can see that it's a details block and the CSS variable will be shown when you click on it. But we'll be looking at the settings in the sidebar. And if you click on the background color, you can see that we have all of our color options available. We've enabled all of the colors in this details block because it's not really used that much throughout the theme. But if we were to click on a paragraph block on the left and view those colors, you can see that we only have this dark gray and black option available. So we've limited that in our theme.json file because in the design, there's only 2 colors for the paragraph, so we don't want to give editors that option. And it's also a preemptive measure because, as you can see, we have this nice bright yellow in our color palette, and we don't want our editors to be able to change the paragraph text to that color. So that is why we limited that. And if we take a look at our headings blocks, maybe if we click on an H2, and we take a look at our settings, you can see that we don't have any color options at all. Again, the design didn't have any color options for the headings, so we just removed that completely. And towards the top under styles, we have some custom block styles that we've added to some of our blocks. And block styles basically allow you to apply alternative styles to existing blocks. If you click on one, it'll add a class name to the element. And for this heading example in particular, for accessibility, heading structure is so important. And I find that sometimes editors will instead use the incorrect heading just to get the style that they want. They might be like, oh, I like the way an H3 looks, I'll just use that. But as we know, that's bad for accessibility because you'd be skipping an entire heading level. And if you run an accessibility scan, you'll get an error. So to remediate that issue, we've introduced heading block styles. So a user can just simply apply that heading style to whatever heading they choose. And taking a look at some of the other settings below for typography, we have a set of font sizes that we have added in our theme.json file. This follows our font scale system. And we've also removed the ability to add a custom font size. So an editor can't just add an arbitrary number in. Whatever font size they choose is within our system. And we've also removed a number of other settings like line height and letter spacing. Again, those small things can change the entire look of your site if editors have access to them. So we removed those. And lastly, under dimensions, we have some spacing options for margins as well as padding. Again, that's within a system that we've set so that the spacing is consistent throughout the site.
So, Christina, one dynamic that's standing out to me is that it seems like there's a balance here between needing a certain amount of control to prevent situations like user 899 picking hot pink or neon lime for a page where they shouldn't, and at the same time you probably don't want the control of colors done in a way where only a single person on the team understands it. I think what I'm seeing here is that the way you've structured CalaPress, some of what you're talking about, the way things are defined in user.json, there's the benefit of control. There's a centralized place where such things are defined. And that place is also a place that has like a communal control to it. It's, a theme.json file to me doesn't imply that it belongs only to one of the three of you, which I think would be a recipe for argument if like color or font size could be changed by only a single person. Is that, first of all, is that accurate? And then is that something you're consciously thinking about as you're structuring these systems?
Yeah, it's with this new way of the editor, that is definitely another consideration we have to take in mind when we're building out these blocks, is thinking about the editor settings and restrictions and options. It's a different way to think about things for sure.
Yeah, I call it a bunch of different things. I've kind of settled on guided design, where we're enforcing brand standards and things like spacing and all that sort of stuff. We're enforcing that through theme.json for the editor. So there's freedom, yes, but freedom within restrictions, freedom within guidelines that are set by the designer, by the brand guidelines, and we're sort of enforcing those in the site in a way that's natural and doesn't feel artificial or tacked on. Like, you notice everything that Christina showed is just built into the editor that you get for any block in WordPress. And that's kind of our philosophy, is we want to work with WordPress. We want to integrate it with what's there natively. For us as developers, we try and we all agree on what's going to be in theme.json. Christina is definitely the general in charge of that. That's kind of her baby for a lot of the stuff. And so it's important as a team that if you're going to touch that, we need to all agree on it and what it's going to be, so that we don't overwrite each other's changes or whatever. And also that you don't overwrite things through CSS files, like for a given block. I don't want to go in and kind of rip out what's already there by default. So a lot of communication required.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
I will continue. Along with customizing the settings for blocks, we've also added some custom formatting buttons. So if you could please scroll down to the table example. Yes, thank you. So to give some context, we wanted to create some tables in our theme that had these checkmark icons to indicate if something was included. And keeping accessibility into consideration, it's important to not depend on the image to convey crucial information. So we wanted to include some screen reader text to provide better context. If you actually click on the advanced panel in the right, Jeff, on the bottom, please. There's a space that allows you to add an additional CSS class. So theoretically, you could add a screen-reader-text class to visually hide this table. But with how this class is set up, it'll apply it to the parent block. It won't actually apply it to the inline content. So we don't want to hide the entire table. We only want to hide specific text within the table. So that is why we came up with the solution. And if you actually highlight a piece of text and then click the drop down in the toolbar and select screen reader text, it'll apply a class to that text that is visually hidden on the front end. So in the editor, I've added this gray highlight and this little accessibility icon to indicate that it's screen reader text. But if you actually view the page on the front end, it'll be hidden and only available to screen readers.
That is very impressive. I don't think I have seen that kind of interaction before in an editor like this.
I just want to point out again, Christina did a brilliant job on this where it's built into the toolbar, right? You don't have to go someplace else. It's not like you don't have to open this panel over here. It's just like highlighting it or doing anything else. It's just right there. You click on it and you're good to go.
Yeah, we've put quite a bit of thought into enhancing the editor experience to make sure it's more user-friendly for editors, and so that they're not like too overwhelmed with so many options. And I think that these seemingly small things that aren't very hard to do make quite an impact on the editor experience as a whole. And like, as you saw, there's a variety of ways to change the appearance of blocks right from the editor. So to save us some time, we enjoy using patterns so that we can have some pre-made layouts available to use as well. Jeff wanted to open the block inserter. There we go. Thank you. Patterns are especially helpful if you use the same patterns throughout multiple pages on your site. And if to minimize some options that are available, we remove all the default WordPress patterns just because we want our clients, again, to make sure that everything they add through the editor matches their design. And so that's why we remove the WordPress ones. And we've set up different categories that we've to categorize our different patterns to make them easier to find. And for every project, we always have one category related to that project in particular that lists all of their patterns. So they have one place to go for everything. And another thing we consider when we make patterns is it's not just for everyday content editing. It's sort of like a backup plan too as well. Like, there might be some more complex layouts that are only seen on the homepage, but if someone goes in and accidentally deletes everything and doesn't realize until like a week later, they can at least go back to their patterns and add in the first starter pattern that they had. So at least they don't have to start from step 0. Basically, our process for creating a pattern is looking at how much effort it takes to build something out. And if there's multiple settings applied or a bunch of nested blocks, it'll warn a pattern so that editors don't have to go through that entire process themselves. If we add a pull-out box pattern, for example, yes, we can see that it's just a group block, heading block, and a paragraph block, which seems simple enough. But if you take a look at the settings on the right for the group in the Styles tab, You can see there's a background color and some spacing applied to it. So not a ton of settings, but it's enough for if someone were to try to recreate it themselves, they might choose the wrong background color. They might choose different padding to make it look slightly different. So this provides some consistency and is more efficient.
Mm. How do you go about deciding that an element like this one needs end user definable padding at all? Like I'm just imagining some designers that I've worked with in the past who would say, no, these should all have exactly the same padding or margin. Anytime it gets used, we should not have different margins on this element, usage to usage.
Yeah. This is sort of why we have the spacing presets, so they can't at least go with some other arbitrary amount of spacing. But in some cases, we actually lock our patterns too, so that you can only edit the content and you can't edit the settings. It depends on the use case for each pattern.
That makes sense. That feels like such a helpful thing to have in a conversation with your client or stakeholders, to make it clear, like, okay, yeah, we can do this. We can let you modify the pattern, but sometimes it's beneficial to lock it down. Like, then it feels like you have so many knobs and dials here that facilitate better conversations and collaborations with customers and your clients. And like, you know, this is technically impressive, but I think what I'm finding most exciting about this is the friction that I'm imagining this removes from like the day-to-day work of making and running a website. That's very valuable when you're building a website for the long term, when you are working on the assumption that like this site is going to last a long time, different from the assumption that I was often in a decade plus ago, like, yeah, we're going to make this site, it'll last for 3 years, then we'll throw it away and we'll rebuild it with like the next new version of WordPress or Drupal. I don't think it's a good idea anymore. I think we got to escape the website relaunch, which means they need to be built to last.
Yeah, and the other negotiation, I mean, everything's give and take, right? The other negotiation is, right, okay, we don't let you change it at all. And then in a year, when you do want to change the padding, well, you have to hire a developer to do that, versus you're handling it through business logic. You tell your editors, no, don't do that. And even if they do, they can't mess it up too bad. But it's like a trade-off and a negotiation. Yeah, you can adjust it a little bit, but you don't have to hire a developer. So, you know, kind of
and it's worth nothing to say that this is another benefit of having the hybrid approach, because you can lock and unlock these things in your PHP code as well. So you can define user capabilities, like a specific user can have locking enabled for some of these patterns and blocks, while the other user with higher capabilities, they are unlocked. So that gives an immense amount of freedom for a site admin to let their own user have different capabilities over which pattern to use, which pattern should be unlocked, which shouldn't be unlocked. Whereas if you go fully for the full site editing, it will be a bit more complicated.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It seems like full site editing starts with everything open to everyone, and then like locking it down is perhaps more work than starting with hybrid.
People may debate that, but based on our experience and our clients' use cases, we found that hybrid is helping us in that aspect much more.
Sorry, Christina, I think I took over for you. Carry on.
Oh, no, that's okay. Another way we utilize patterns is actually auto-loading them into certain custom post types. So if we could go back to the dashboard, please. And click Add New News and Alerts. You can see that this pattern just auto-loads into the page. The date is automatically pulled in from the current post date, and this gray block right here pulls in the featured image. So if we set a featured image in the page settings, you can see it just gets pulled into the editor for you, and then you can continue editing the rest of your page content as per usual. auto loading these templates in saves some time rather than an editor having to go through the process of opening up the block inserter patterns, looking for the pattern, inserting it into the page. And we typically like utilizing this for custom post types or posts because the content is usually the same and has the same structure and layout. So this just saves time and ensures consistency. This is a simple example, but we've had some more complex layouts on other client sites. So yeah, even though this is a simple layout, it's definitely beneficial.
This particular example is also one that I think I need. I am using the Gutenberg module in Drupal to bring this editor into Drupal, which sometimes feels like a science experiment. And I need to figure out how to do this exact thing. Like make the default image just be at the top of the page. I need to reproduce that in Drupal now.
The answer is simple: switch to WordPress.
Yeah, exactly. Why do I do silly things and I tell myself, oh yeah, it's part of my job to smash together this WordPress thing and this Drupal thing. Although like that module is sponsored and run by like a serious agency based in Europe that is like using it for serious projects. But I adopted it years ago thinking like, ooh, this is a fun science experiment.
Cool.
Yeah, so now that I touched on some of the editor experience and patterns, I'll hand the mic off to Jeff, where he'll chat about our custom blocks and show you some examples of why we decided to use our builder theme with a hybrid approach.
Thank you, Christina. So like my job at Calamuna basically is to sort of help architect the sites and help us all decide how we're going to build it, how we're going to put the Lego pieces together. And one of the key questions often is, should we use ACF to build blocks or should we use native React to build the blocks? It's a big stumbling block, and probably for a developer, it's the #1 issue standing in the way of them adopting either a hybrid or a block theme. React is hard, especially for people who have worked in WordPress for 15 years and they don't know JavaScript as well, maybe. So they like, I don't want to get into it because I don't want to have to learn React. What we've decided to do is take this hybrid approach to a philosophical level as well, where we can do either. If it makes more sense to build a block with ACF because it's super fast, we'll do that. If it's better to build it with native React components because it needs to be more fully featured or just lends itself to that, we can do that as well. Helps me onboard people a lot quicker. A developer can jump in and start contributing right away. They don't have to learn React if they don't know it. And it also provides a gentle slope ramp to get themselves up to speed with React and native blocks if they want to. So some examples of that are on the homepage here. Basically, we have a variety. We've got patterns here that Christina talked about when we were looking at the pattern library. That's what this is, this whole layout, and it's built of blocks that are in there. So that's one way of doing things that's almost entirely in the CMS with a few, with some styling applied to it, obviously. We've got this section here, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the ACF block, right? You can't tell.
Native React.
This is the native block, and then we'll look at the ACF one. So what I want to kind of show is that they look very similar. One of the complaints about ACF blocks, building them in that way, is that the editing experience isn't very close to what it is for a native block. But if you're sort of deliberate about it, you can get pretty darn close. So in this native block, we've got the cards over here in the right. You can do each card and edit them how you want them to be with kind of standard fields over here. And as you type in, it live updates. Jeff is a developer. We've decided to repurpose Fast Track to be our resume site instead. And it appears over here in the editor as you're doing it, pretty much the way it will appear on the front end. So Ollie built this with React as a native block. Further down the page, this block here, these featured blocks, featured cards, was built with ACF. But you can see the editing experience is pretty similar. You've still got the stuff on the right. You can still see what's happening on the left. If we wanted to change this to Christina is also a developer, it's appearing on the left. So you can have, it's invisible to the editor. They don't know how we built this. They don't know what Lego pieces went into this. And that's good. They shouldn't have to know that stuff. It should just work. They should be able to jump in, do their content editing, and have a consistent experience no matter what they do. What it does for us as developers, like I said, gives us a ton of flexibility when we want to decide how we ought to build a block.
Yeah, that has been one of the biggest points of friction that I've heard over the last 5, 6, however many years it's been of block editor coming into the WordPress world, that there is such a significant contingent of WordPress developers who are all in on ACF using fields as their unit of content organization. And there's a big overlap between the problem spaces that ACF and the block editor are addressing. And if they don't play well together, then you can get stuck in analysis paralysis. And it seems like you're pushing through that analysis paralysis and saying, like, these can be made to work together. They already were made to work together, but it's a little clunky. We can make it more polished so that the person using it isn't wondering to themselves, wait, why does this one just feel different than the other one? That would throw them off in their day-to-day work.
Yeah, the goal should be to reduce friction, to make it as easy as possible for an editor to get their job done. They shouldn't have to wrestle with the CMS. They shouldn't have to worry about why stuff doesn't work the same way from one place to another place. That's really an underappreciated part of our job as developers, is to make the editing experience really quality. It's something we kind of pride ourselves on. We want to make sure. My Canon event moment as a developer was at my first agency, the second agency. I was just starting out, so like, just go change this photo in this flyout menu. I'm like, oh, it's a 5-minute job, super easy. 3.5 hours, Steve. 3.5 hours to change a photo on a stupid menu because they decided, well, the way WordPress does menus is dumb. We're going to rip it out and do it our own way. And I couldn't find it anywhere. It was so frustrating. And I vowed, never again. Anything we build from here on out is going to be much easier.
Yes, man, I still need to write a blog post or something titled, like, "Don't make your UI lie."
Oh,
a lot of web development teams decide, like, I don't like the way WordPress or Drupal does this thing, and I'll totally rebuild it in a way that is not knowable from the user interface. And then you approach it from the user interface and, like, this user interface is lying to me because it's not what's happening. It's like, oh, right, because the developer who built it mucked at some deeper level, and that is not visible from the user interface. And now enjoy your 3.5 hours of pain.
Yeah, you're right. I had to go look at the code to figure out where it was. And at that point, you have failed, in my opinion, as a developer, if you have to do that. So the very last thing, I'm just going to very quickly touch on this. This is an example of where the hybrid approach really works. The design was to have this gray section behind the search bar here. You could achieve something like that with blocks if you do a lot of custom styling and all. But then you run the risk of the user deleting the search thing out from here, and they don't have the search bar anymore. So this page is actually a combination. This part here, along with the background element, is part of the PHP template for this page. And everything else on the page is done in the editor, so the user can go and access and edit it. So this was an example of just making decisions in a hybrid environment where we need to balance usability with making sure it actually works and it functions right. You know, the search bar has some functionality behind it that's important. It doesn't get messed up. So we used a combination of a PHP template along with block editing features in here. And that was kind of the last thing I wanted to show you.
Yeah, and it feels like nearly an hour here has just flown by. We'll wrap it up. We'll wrap it up in just a minute or two. Before we go, I'm plugging in the chat here. If you want to try out what you've seen here today, you can sign up for a free Pantheon account. I love that we've just seen this all in a Pantheon dev environment. Like, you can sign up for a Pantheon account, make a dev test and live environment for WordPress. Though to try out what you're seeing here today, you can just do it all in a dev environment. Go check out Calipress on GitHub and see for yourself which mechanisms here will be best suited to your team. And that's I think an overriding message we've heard all throughout the discussion today, that there's so many different ways a website can be sliced and diced, and there are a lot of people who will have strong opinions on how it gets sliced and diced. And this hybrid theming approach that you have shown balances competing priorities, competing needs really well. I have found that a lot of web teams get bogged down in thinking that there is a pure right answer to be found. And I think what I'm hearing you say is like, for a lot of questions, there are multiple options that work, and you've got to balance your trade-offs and figure out who are you working to serve. And often that person is like the website visitors and the website editors who are going to be using this website for a long, long time. And if we can make trade-offs and decisions that benefit them, well, then that's probably the right path to pursue. Any closing thoughts, Calamuna folks, before we go?
Just want to thank you for having us. It's been a pleasure and a joy being here. We love our clients. We love the sites that we build. And I just want to say on a personal note, this is a wonderful team, this working team that we had to do all this. Couldn't have asked for better partners than Christina and Ali. They're both super smart, very thoughtful about how they do things. So I feel lucky to be on the team.
I do as well. Thanks again, Steve. And yeah, just echoing Jeff, I think that we each have our own strengths, so work well as a team together.
Thank you guys. Yeah, like we started our talks, all come together. When it happens, then magic happens.
Mm-hmm. Also, we're going to suggest to our designers they ditch Figma and go with Legos and crayons. I feel like that's a much better way to go.
Yes, Legos and crayons, undervalued design tool here in the 2020s. All right, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you, Calamuna folks. Thanks to all of you watching. I'll see you on the internet and hopefully at an in-person event sometime soon. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.